cat in the wall, eh? Okay, now you're talking my language.
Do you ever drunk Baileys from a shoe?
Oh, great. Thanks, Mother, for replacing the baby aspirin with LSD.
How much you want to make a bet I can throw a football over the mountain?
All right, welcome into the View from C-Deck for a really crappy Week 3 lineup for us to talk about for gambling purposes, but not so bad when you think about how good the Dyerwolf and I did last week. A combined 9-1 in games. I think we only had one overlap game too, and that was the Ohio State under, which we killed.
Yeah.
And then we also had my only loss. We were head to head because you had Texas and I had Bama. Your crush finally paid off. But we'll start this week, since this is the Buckeye podcast, with the Buckeyes giving up 29. It's Western Kentucky at home with an over-under of 64. Dyerwolf, man, what are you thinking? We have been under and not covering spread so far.
Yeah, the fact that it went to 29, I almost want to bet on them, on Western Kentucky, because it's just over those 4 touchdowns. That's a pretty significant difference. I think it was 27 and a half.
That's where it opened, yeah.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I mean, they like to score a lot of points, throw the ball around the yard. So I don't think we're going to hold them to 3 or even 7, most likely. But I don't think they're going to be scoring like 27 or anything on us either. I'm thinking it's going to be more like probably like a 42-17 or even like 38-14, something like that. I think we'll hit the under. I would bet on that. I wouldn't touch that line though, because the way that they are terrible against the run, which we're not very good at, but we have really good running backs. So even though our line has struggled, I could see us just driving it down the field with ease, and we could score 50, and I wouldn't be shocked. And then that over all of a sudden is, I don't know, not looking great. I mean, hitting the under, but covering that spread will probably be easy if we hit 50.
Over and covering is where I'm going right now. I don't really the cover. I'm not that confident in, and neither one of these are my picks. But the over, I think they'll move the ball a little bit on us and get to 17. But I think Travion could have a huge day. I mean, I don't know how they're gonna, if they do commit to stopping the run in a way they couldn't do. They gave up. I was wrong, by the way. They didn't play Holy Cross. They played Houston Christian, who I never even heard of, and still gave up 4.5 yards of carry against them. So we're gonna run the ball successfully, and with Travion being such a home run hitter, it could be a really big day for us.
It'd be really nice to get me like 200 yards for my season-long bet, because I need him to average about 85 yards a game, and he's at about 50 right now. So
yeah. That's no good. But the Haas did pick this as one of his handies, and he picked Western Kentucky. The 29 is a lot of points to be given up the way we've played so far, so don't necessarily blame him for that. The rest of the schedule, though, starts out at a nooner with one of my playoff picks and my Big Ten championship pick to start the year, Penn State, traveling to Illinois. First true road game of the year for Penn State. So they're only giving up 14.5. Now, Illinois lost last week. Both games they struggled mightily early and were down. Both games they came back, but these are against bad competition so far. I'm not a believer in them. I am a believer in Penn State, and I think they at least win by 17. So something like 38 or like 38-17 sounds good. Illinois' offense may be okay, but their defense is not what it was last year. And Penn State also has a little revenge factor coming in, so I'll take the Nittany Lions.
I thought about picking this one too. But it's one of those things that seem too good to be true to me. Like, it's almost ballsy territory, because I'm with you. I could see him crushing them. I could see him winning by 28. So when I see 14.5, I'm like, what's going on here? So it almost makes me want to bet the opposite and get real ballsy, but I'm not getting that ballsy. I'm staying away, but I would bet.
That's also a Haas's handy, by the way. Another Haas handy, another nooner, and a game that is this is the ballsy pick territory. Number 15, Kansas State goes to Missouri, only giving up 4.5. both teams are 2-0, so maybe they think that the public will be on that. But I took something in this. The Haas took Kansas State because the line seems too low. I took the under though because Missouri's offense is not good, and if they're thinking it's going to be close and Missouri's offense is not good, this is going to end up having to be a really low scoring game. So I'm taking the under on the 48 just based on that. That's
one of your picks.
Yeah,
that's a good idea. If I were to bet on that one, I'd take Missouri because of the ballsy thing. I'm not really sold on Kansas State that much. I don't know, but Missouri doesn't look anything special either. But the fact ranked team against unranked, like the general public, I feel like would bet all over Kansas State.
Right, you would think so, and they've been historically way better than Missouri has over the last decade.
Yeah.
2:30 game, one of your Dyerwolf delights. Notre Dame, Ohio State's opponent next week, laying 34.5 against a Central Michigan team that's already got their doors blown off by Michigan State once this year. So you got to tell me why you're picking Central Michigan to go ahead and cover this, keep it within 34.5, not lose by 5 touchdowns.
There's a couple reasons. One being that's a really big number. 2, I know Texas Tech is trash, but they did beat Texas Tech. Wyoming did.
This is Central Michigan and Notre Dame.
Oh, Central Michigan. So this is basically just because I think they're going to look ahead to us. It's a huge number. I could see it being like, I don't know. I mean, like 42-10, something like that. I mean, that's barely not covering, but that number is so big, and I think they're going to assume they're going to win that game because they are, and they're going to be looking ahead to us, and I think they just barely don't cover. That number was just so big, and I like looking at stuff like that. It's like looking ahead or just coming off a loss or a big win. I think those are big factors.
Yeah, I think I'm with you on this one, but the first quarter is going to tell the tale. If it's close in the first quarter because they didn't bring it, then you got a good chance of keeping it close enough. But if they come out and they're up 14-0 at the end of the first quarter, see you later, baby. They're going to win this game like 52-7.
Unless it is it could be like an Ohio State Indiana game of years past where it's like 35-7 at halftime, and then they just take their foot off the gas.
I haven't seen that yet from this team. All right. I know, speaking of big spreads and teams coming off a loss, Roll Damn Tide is playing a road game against South Florida at Raymond James, though, which is very bizarre. I'm not really sure how this happened. I'm sure there's a story behind it. But laying 32, and you have taken the Tide. I'm guessing it's a lot due to Saban looking to jumpstart his team. I do think this game is a litmus test of what Saban can do with what kind of team he's got. Are they an NIL team that's focused just on myself and making it to the NFL maybe, or just got my money and don't stay motivated, or was getting their ass kicked because they got their ass kicked last week. The score doesn't really indicate how close that game was against Texas. Does that fire them up and get them started to try and run the SEC table and backdoor their way into the playoff?
That is exactly my thought process. I mean, I was going to stay away from it, and then I couldn't figure out my 5th game. But I went with them solely because, I mean, their season's not over. They lost to Texas. They didn't look good, but they went out. They're in, period. So this is a game where they know they're going to win, but they got to get shit figured out. And if, like you said, are they like a Texas A&M where they're just getting paid to play and they don't give a shit, and they have high recruiting rankings and all that stuff, but who cares? I'm about to be in the NFL. Or are they going to be pissed and they want to win a title because they haven't there in a few years now? They're used to winning one every other year, and it's been since 20 now.
Yeah.
So that's I think they just absolutely blow their doors off. They don't take it easy on them when they're up 35-0 or whatever it is, and then they just keep going.
Over 61, over under. I think I like the over in this game because I know South Florida plays at a high pace, which could get themselves off the field really fast and could get the score run up on them real easily, I think. So like something like 56-7 covers that, and I think that's kind of close to what we're looking at here.
Real quick on the flip side of that, though, I was shocked. I saw a stat that said it was like something on Facebook, just like telling you tips on what to bet. Of course, that's showing up on my feed. But
what? Do you gamble, Casey?
Yeah, but it said Alabama after a straight loss, the under has hit like 6 games in a row.
See, that means the overs do.
Yeah, you could look at it that way, but that told me that their opponent just doesn't score. You know what I mean?
I said 56-7. I didn't say that South Florida's going to put up those points.
And what was it? What was the over under?
61.
So yeah, it'd have to be something.
I'm just mainly saying that because of the pace. That like if they're going out there and trying to run a high pace and giving Bama extra possessions, then Bama's going to score. I think just because of the talent discrepancy. 3:30 game that the Haas picked for Haas Handy. I actually like this pick a lot. I can't believe you didn't pick this game because I thought you were going to. Because last year, what was your strategy last year?
I bet against Rutgers and
No.
Yeah, against Rutgers.
No, you had another one. It wasn't Rutgers. Who was the worst team in the Big Ten last year? And continues to be.
Northwestern, Nebraska.
Yes, Northwestern. You kept betting against Northwestern last year, but you kept bringing their crappy games up. This week they traveled to Duke in the Nerd Bowl.
I did think about betting on that.
Yeah, minus 19 for Duke. Haas took it, though. He'll lay those points because Northwestern is trash, and Duke actually looks like a pretty good team this year, and I'm with them all the way. I almost picked it, but I didn't want to pick too many games the same as him.
Yeah, I mean, who's the second best team in the ACC? If they beat Clemson, it might be them. I don't know.
Them or Miami. Miami looks good right now.
Yeah.
3:30 game. This is your new strategy for this year. Iowa hosting Western Michigan. Over under a 42. Oh, it grew, I guess, after last week, and they still went under last week. So under 42. Brian Ferentz I think he hasn't scored 325 total points this year, and they're already under right now.
Was it a 28 average?
It's like 25.
Okay. But I don't think he's hit that number once. Or he might have hit. I was thinking it was 28. I don't know, though. But, yeah, I mean, there's not a whole lot of thought process here. Iowa doesn't score. The only thing is, who are they playing again?
Western Michigan.
They're trash. So I could see, I mean, they scored a bunch of points last year on like pick sixes and stuff like that. So that couldn't bite me in the ass. But I'm thinking like, I don't know, 31-3, something like that.
Yeah. I mean, I'm staying away from, but I like the Iowa unders in general. 3:30 game that I picked, Oregon State hosting San Diego State, laying 24.5. I'm taking the Beavs, though, and laying the 24.5. They've looked really good so far. San Diego State is a really bad defense at the moment, and their offense is all predicated around their quarterback, who's had turnover issues already. Oregon State's defense is nasty. They're not going to be able to run the ball at all against them besides the quarterback stuff, and I think that just wears him out faster, makes things worse. And Oregon State ends up piling on them in the second half at least. San Diego State, they played Ohio U and won by 7 barely, but it wasn't even really, it was even closer than that probably, and played another bad team in their second week and didn't have a good showing. So I don't trust them, and I trust Oregon State right now, and the Pac-12 continues to roll.
Yeah, that one's, I don't know a whole lot about that one. I'd stay away, but if I had to, I'd probably roll with Oregon State just because of how bad the opponent is.
All right, Washington and Michigan State, 5 o'clock. Obviously, huge things happening in Michigan State land in Spartyville. Is Mel Tucker about to get the axe? I mean, horrible what happened, but couldn't have happened, worked out better for them, I think, because they get out of that contract that they were already regretting anyway.
I mean, how stupid were they to make that contract in the first place? But
1 year. But only giving up 16 to Washington. Now they've won pretty handily their first 2 games. Washington comes in though. So Penix, he's done well in his two. He started at Michigan State twice, so he knows the lay of the land. Washington's offense is averaging 472 yards a game through the air. We know how Michigan State's defense has been against good passing offenses in the last couple of years. Haas and I both are just hammering the Huskies for this. I mean, it seems like an easy line.
I actually almost bet the opposite of it. I thought about Sparty, and then I'm like, all that stuff going on with Mel Tucker, I'm not touching it.
Yeah, it could get. I mean, that could do. It could galvanize them. I don't know how, but it could. You know, things. Yeah. People are weird.
Yeah, I don't know. Michigan State's weird sometimes. Like they beat, like you said, their pass defense is so bad. So that's probably a good reason why to bet on Washington. But I'll never forgive them for giving me false hope in 2021. 49, I think.
7 o'clock game, a game that's traditionally been a pretty big game in the past, but not this year because Florida stinks. Tennessee going to the Swamp. I took the under in this game. Tennessee's laying 6.5, which seems like ballsy pick territory almost with how bad Florida looked against Utah, and how Utah kind of struggled last week on the road, even though they beat Baylor. But Tennessee didn't look good against Austin Peay last week. They had a players-only meeting this week. They looked so bad after a pretty solid victory over Virginia in week 1. But I'm just going to want the under because the offense for Florida, not so good. Tennessee's defense looks a little bit better. But I don't trust Joe Milton that much. He's a little inconsistent, so I don't know if Tennessee's offense just goes off because Florida's run D is pretty solid, and Tennessee's been running the ball better than they've thrown it this year with their hurry-up offense. So taking the under, 58.5 seems like too much for me.
This was one that I was debating on for my 5th because the Tennessee spread, it almost seemed too good to be true. Because I feel like they're, at this point, they might be the second best team in the SEC. It's hard to say right now, but and Florida looked like they looked like trash against Utah, I thought. So honestly, it almost wanted me to bet on Florida because of the ballsy thing. So I just stayed away, but I would bet on Tennessee. I'm not sure about the over/under. I just wanted to stay away from this one in general.
Yeah, all right. Game you didn't want to stay away from. Texas coming off the massive win last week. They looked really good, and they're one of my 4 playoff teams now. Spoiler alert. Hosting Wyoming, though, giving up 28.5, which Wyoming does have a victory over Texas Tech, like you mentioned earlier when talking about the Central Michigan game. Over-under of only 48.5, though, with 28.5. They're thinking Texas's defense steps up. Ewers looking like a Heisman candidate so far this season. So why are you taking Wyoming?
I almost did the under, and then I saw how low that number was, and I'm like, I'm not doing that. But it's mostly coming off that big win. It kind of makes me think of, I'm not comparing Wyoming to a Big Ten school, but it reminds me of the 17 season when we had that huge win against Penn State at home with JT.
17, yeah.
And then we came the very next week, we got our freaking doors blown off by either Purdue or Iowa. I always
Iowa.
Yeah. But I'm not saying they're going to lose, but they were probably so pumped up in that locker room, and they're so like they're winning it all in their minds, in those players' minds right now. You know what I mean? So Wyoming, they're not great. They did beat a Power 5 team in Texas Tech, who could be one of the worst teams in the Big 12. Very easily. But they did beat them. So 28.5, I like that extra half point. It makes me feel a little bit better. I'm thinking it's going to be, they're not going to score much, but maybe like, I don't know, 42. Maybe they do put up a few points to 17 to just barely cover.
They only beat Rice. Texas only beat Rice by 27, so this is doable. Maybe a look-ahead game, so maybe a look-behind game, but hook 'em, baby. That's all I got for that. I think they look legit to me, especially that D-line was fierce, and their O-line was pretty nice too. Yes. And last game we'll talk about, one we normally wouldn't talk about, but it is the game of the week, and we didn't, none of us picked it. Colorado, who maybe that Vegas is finally catching up to on the lines, because last week's was a joke, and I threw him in some parlays. You actually won on yours. Get laying 23.5 against Colorado State. This is the game day game. Yuck, for the slate this week. But I think I like the over, and I like Colorado to cover because their offense is real nice right now, and I don't think Deion's going to let up on the gas and maybe try to win his son a Heisman here if they can keep throwing for like 450 yards a game or whatever he's averaging right now.
Yeah, I guess I would do Colorado. I don't know a whole lot about Colorado State. I assume they're ass.
I think you assume correct.
Yeah, and he's not. I mean, he's obviously not the type of guy to take it easy on him. He wants his respect one way or another. So I could see him absolutely killing him. But I think Hunter's actually higher on the Heisman odds than his son right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's going to go away though eventually, because if you keep a quarterback throwing for the kind of numbers he's putting up, he'll pass up the two-way thing. So I think he only had like 3 catches for like 25 yards last week after the huge week 1 where he played 120 snaps and had 11 catches on one side and a pick on the other side. Like, that's just unsustainable.
It all just depends on the big games. Like, if he does that shit against like USC or something like that, then sorry.
We're about to find out how real Colorado is, because we don't know if TCU's any good. We know Nebraska's not any good, and Colorado State's probably not any good. So we're not really going to know how good they are. But they go to Watson to play Oregon next week, and then they host USC the week after that. So we're going to find out real fast if they're how real they are.
Very next week is Oregon?
Yeah. Oregon and then USC.
I wouldn't be shocked if they beat Oregon, but I would be shocked if they beat USC.
I would be very shocked. USC looks real good. So speaking of, we're going to get to our 4 playoff teams after that. I've already put the stank down twice this year. 2 teams lost the first week. 1 team lost the next week. I am really bad at this, apparently. But I'm going to keep going. I still have Georgia, and I still have Penn State. If I had a survivor pool, that'd be it. I'm putting Texas in, because it's going to be almost hard for them to not make it now. They're going to have to lose twice almost for sure, since I guess that wasn't a conference game, but they get a rematch with whoever could beat them in the Big 12 title game, assuming they don't lose 2 in the regular season. So I like them to make it a lot. And then who do I replace? I replaced Bama with them. I still have Florida State, I think, too, as my last team, just because I don't believe in anybody else in the ACC.
I feel like I can't not put us in just because of who I am. But Georgia's the obvious one. Texas, I feel like, is the other lock right now, because you're right. They have to lose 2 games. They one game, I don't care who, where, when, they're in. If they go undefeated, lose the Big 12 championship, they're in. If they lose 1 game and win the Big 12 championship, they're obviously in. So Georgia, Texas. I'm going to put us in just because I can't put us in. So then it's down to USC or Florida State. And I think the Pac-12 is just so good that there could easily be a 2-loss champion, just like last year. And I agree.
I agree. I just think it's a murderer's row. It's hard to pick anybody to not to escape. I mean, if anybody gets out of there with 1 win, they're in. Like that's a lock. But I don't know if anybody can.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that'll do it for this week's, though. Not as short as I thought we were going to make it. Gambling podcast, but that's who we are. We love just talking about college football and gambling. It's like it's 2 great things just mixed together. But I'm just Matt. This is Dyerwolf. Please follow, subscribe, comment on our videos, help us with the algorithm, and we will see you guys next time.
Hey guys! Whoa, big gulps, huh? All right. Well, see you later.
A rich man's world.